All righty. Welcome to our May Day special edition of Socialist Party 2024. My name is Tony, and I'm a volunteer with the campaign as well as a member of Left Unity Study. And we have several folks who are going to be joining our live stream. Most importantly, our candidates. Well, not most importantly, but definitely we want to hear from our candidates, Bill Stodden and Stephanie Chelinsky. And we're going to be talking about some very important things, some very important topics. And I may be coming out of the woodwork a few times to make some comments, but I welcome everyone to this live stream. And without further delay, I'll welcome Bill.
Hello. Just a real brief word.
Socialist Party. Hey,
I think that it's important to mention that this is the second time we've actually done a live stream. The first one, the presidential inauguration, the presidential State of the Union response, it went pretty well. The video got a bunch of views, and that was really cool. And we had a bunch of comments that were asked at the time. We've kind of, the student protests have really blown up since then, and the Palestine conflict is ongoing, and there's 15 or 20 other different crises that have all hit between then and now. And so it's good to be back. It's good to try to. Tony, we got an echo there. It's good to have an opportunity to start to address some of those issues. Stephanie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I don't think the echo's on me because I muted while you were talking. So my name is Stephanie Chelinsky. I'm here in Minneapolis, Minnesota right now. I've been a party member for well over 20 years. I'm convener of the Women's Commission. I also serve on the National Committee of the Socialist Party, and I have for many, many years. And I did serve as the party chair for a long time. We have a great local here in Minneapolis, and we also have 3 elected officials here in local government.
Excellent. I think the one thing that I wanted to do today, before we get started, is I want to kind of read our campaign statement on the student protests. If you'll give me just a moment, I'll pull it up here and then I'll read it. This is a brand new, hot off the presses, like no one's even seen this except for the campaign. This has just come out today, so I'll go ahead and read it here real quick, live on air. The Stodden Chelinsky 2024 statement on the student protests. Oh, what happened here? Hang on. Around the country, multiple campuses are experiencing a new wave of student protests against the active role being played by the U.S. in the war against Gaza. Not only do students conscientiously protest the ongoing genocide, human rights violations, and illegal territorial dispossession being conducted by the State of Israel against the people of Gaza, but they also engage in civil disobedience to protest the immoral use of money, materiel, and diplomacy by the United States to support Israel. Protests in support of the people of Palestine are being routinely represented in the mainstream media as, quote, anti-Semitic. These protests are being manipulated by professional agitators, according to the mainstream press. These terms are employed to invalidate any legitimate issue that students are protesting, to personally demonize the protesters in the minds of Americans, and to run cover for U.S. support for the murder of more than 35,000 people in Gaza since October 7th by the State of Israel, in one of the largest campaigns of state-sponsored terror we've witnessed in the 21st century. In response to this demonization and invalidation, our local state governments deem it reasonable to respond to civil disobedience and calls for divestment and sanctions with violence conducted by armed and armored riot police, deploying military-grade equipment, and followed by mass arrest and detention. We as a campaign stand firmly on the side of these student-organized and led protests. We have seen this script before. In the early 2000s, when socialists and workers joined students and peaceful protesters in the U.S. to protest the U.S. invasion of Iraq and the occupation of Afghanistan, we were met by many of the same responses from the media, reactionaries in the U.S. society, and the police force. When millions from all walks of life, all races, and all classes turned out in the 2010s for protests against police brutality against Black Americans in the streets of our cities, we were met with the same responses from the media, reactionaries in the U.S. society, and the police force. And now this is just another episode of people standing up for a righteous cause, in this case, standing up for solidarity with the people of Gaza and opposing U.S. and college investment in institutions that fund genocide and being demonized, invalidated, and brutalized for it. But as this previous episode of the same program demonstrated, these student protesters today are just in their actions. History will vindicate them in the minds of America. We call on students to continue to protest, and we will call for those protests to spread across this country. The protests should continue to focus not only on the ongoing genocide in Palestine and calls for U.S. institutions to stop directly or indirectly funding the government of Israel that is committing these atrocities in Gaza, but they should also expand their calls to include a critique of the systems of imperialism that make war both permissible and necessary for the survival of capitalism. At its root, all modern war is not only based in feelings of race and nationality, but also is rooted in economic imperatives of capital. War uses weaponry produced in capitalist factories owned by capitalist profiteers, but staffed by members of the working class, to arm members of the working class, to kill other members of the working class. It does not discriminate between militant and civilian. And in this war in particular, evidence points to the deliberate and planned targeting of civilians by the state of Israel as a matter of policy. Protesting that, even if it means wide-scale disruption of civil order in the United States, occupation of college campuses, and strife between peaceful protesters in the state, is ethical, and we stand with this movement. We call on all Americans to endorse and support these protests as far as you can. If you are able, do one or more of the following things. Join the students in their encampments and swell their ranks. Start protests in your own area and increase those numbers. Contribute to defense funds or food funds or strike funds. Organize boycotts, not only of the products that are tied to the state of Israel. There are plenty of excellent online resources produced by the BDS movement, but also boycott American companies that continue to do business with that government, as well as any media outlets who insist on tarring this movement as anti-Semitic, calling peaceful protesters terrorists and professional agitators, or seek to invalidate the correct demands of the protesters. Write letters to your newspaper in support of these protests. Bring the matter before your local city government, your unions, and your student associations, and ask them to pass resolutions and conduct actions in support of the protests. And organize sympathy walkouts, strikes, or other direct action in support of these protests. This movement will not only succeed if the heretofore localized protests become a more general protest, not only against the way that these protests are being responded to by institutions of capitalism to include the state and the media, but also in how these institutions drag us all into immoral acts, both at home and abroad. We as a campaign believe that the time is yesterday for the people of this country to stand up and say, enough. We have had enough of being ignored and demonized when we demonstrate for justice. We have had enough of being beaten. We are tired of having our peaceful protests broken up by billy clubs, riot gear, and tear gas, employed by those who bring violence into our movements for peace. The time for talk is over. It is time for action. And we as a campaign call on all who are able to be active as they can afford to possibly be in this movement and in the support of these protests, and in a broader, more generalized anti-racist, anti-imperialist, and anti-capitalist movement. We are the only ones who can liberate ourselves, and it will take work, effort, and struggle. But there is new opportunity, and we as a society ought not squander it. Thank you. And that's our statement on the student protests. Voila. We'll be publishing that on the website.
Well done. Yeah, if you want to be on the right side of history, you can't do much worse than siding with students protesting wars. I mean, I'm getting an echo, so I don't know if someone can turn down.
Yeah, Tony, I think Tony, I think you're causing an echo whenever you unmute, just FYI.
Yeah, I'm going to try to mute when I'm not talking to avoid that.
Sure.
Yeah, I was about to say something. That's okay. But yeah, so today we're going to be talking about the student campus rebellion, housing, the housing crisis, and the importance of working class folks developing independent power, especially most importantly right now we need to dump the Democrats, right? Dump the Dems. So we'd love to hear from you guys about any of these topics. It sounds like you were talking about the student rebellion, but if you want to take some time to talk about the housing crisis, I know we wanted to talk about that this month as well. Over.
From where I'm at, one of the things I work with on a day-to-day basis is the housing crisis. In this county, I can just tell you the numbers that my group, my agency works with. Last month, this is just in Ames, Iowa, okay, and this is just at one agency of several agencies in the town that work for homelessness prevention. Last month, we gave out something on the order of about $26,000 in rent and utility assistance alone. That's not including the food assistance that we gave out. It's $26,000 in rent and utility assistance. During that same amount of time, we had requests for rent assistance and utility assistance topping $60,000 just in 1 week in just this county in Iowa. And Ames is a town of about 50,000 people. So you're looking at you're looking at whatever the numbers is, more than $1 a person that's being requested for rent and utility assistance just in the city of Ames alone. And we're not able to fund anything close to that. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that our county and our city are both working very hard to try to address this issue. But the way the rules are set up for the county, they can only fund something like $16,000 of assistance in a 3-month period. They have to reject a lot of those requests for rent assistance, and so they go out to the private charities like mine. But the state of Iowa specifically has really done a number on everything related to poor people's issues, because they believe that if you are homeless, or if you if you're hungry or whatever the case may be, your only solution to that problem is to go get another job. I want to also give some statistics of all the people that we help with rent and utility assistance. 60 to 70% of them are employed, and about 40% of them actually have 2 jobs. And so it's not a problem of people not working. The problem is that there's no rent control at all on the horizon. Landlords can charge whatever they want for rent. The state isn't helping us out at all. And it's almost like the state in Iowa, especially, the state government seems to think that if you're poor, that's some sort of crime, and you're some kind of morally deficient individual who deserves to be punished. And so I think that's just a little tiny illustration of the problem. I can imagine in the city of Chicago, life is a whole lot worse for homeless people. It's a whole lot more difficult for homeless people, and there's probably tens of thousands of people that need the kind of assistance that we're seeing here, in the 40s and 50s a month in Ames. And so, I mean, we can identify problems. We can identify that around the country, but we can also talk about some solutions to those problems as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Bill, and really, I guess, disappointing statistics. They can take the wind out of your sails, but since I'm located in Chicago, for those who don't know, my name is Bide. I'm a volunteer for the campaign. But I just want to draw attention to what even the help looks like for people who need rental assistance and who need utility assistance. As you said, Bill, these are people who are applying to like a private charity for rent and utility assistance. And when we're talking about rent, we're talking about money that's eventually going to go to a landlord, right? We're not talking about people who are actually purchasing anything, who are actually buying anything, who are actually gaining an ownership stake of anything in their own lives. So they are dependent on subsidies from the kind hearts of people who are donating to these charities, subsidies that end up going to the landlords and never to building the stability and wealth of these people, 60% of which are already working and 40% of which are working 2 jobs. And this is just an example of how even charity and the ways that our capitalist system has subsidies within it, but the subsidies are always still going to the top of the capitalist class. We can quote example after example after example. The rental assistance that you were talking about. We could talk about how during COVID, the way that businesses were sort of staying in business was that the United States passed the CARES Act, which was a COVID relief act, where the federal government gave out hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. But in order to get these hundreds of billions of dollars, some of you, a lot of people got checks for $800 and then $1,200. And that was for the entirety of the 2 years of the COVID pandemic, right? So try living off of $2,000 anywhere in the United States. It's impossible. So you are on your own. But businesses were able to apply for the PPP loans, which were loans that were given out by the government, loans which are given out by the government to businesses in order to, with the intention, the stated intention of allowing the federal government, these federal funds, to subsidize payrolls. Now, and the idea was, okay, if you subsidize the payrolls with federal funds, you can keep people employed, you can not fire people, and they could still make money from their, we don't have to worry about people losing their jobs during the pandemic. Now, so many people did lose their jobs during the pandemic, but at the time when I was when COVID first hit, I was actually pretty familiar with a couple of different corporate law firms, and I was actually working at a law firm. And one of the things that we were doing from the very beginning was reading the bill while it was being still legislated before it had passed, getting to know all the details of the bill and how it was going to work, because we had to be able to advise clients. All of our clients were, for the most part, businesses, some small, many of them large. And what we realized, or what became apparent from reading the bill for the lawyers who were reading it at the time, was that not only could law firms apply to it, but just about any big business could apply for it. So if you were able to pay for lawyers, teams of lawyers, you're talking 20, 30 lawyers who are staying up, reading and analyzing this bill so that they can tell you about it. If you could afford that, then you could realize that you could get $11 million basically for free from the federal government, paid with our tax dollars, right? You could get $11 million for free with the purpose of keeping your payroll together or keeping employees on your payroll, but that loan would be forgiven. So we're talking about where you and I, as individuals, got about $2,000 total from one $800 check and one $2,000 check. All of these companies, many of them that were so big that they can already afford to put together teams of lawyers, were getting $11 million from the federal government. And these included companies that were already still posting profits during the pandemic, had record revenue years, who didn't actually need the $11 million, but realized that they could get it. So, a lot of the times, I really want people to pay attention to the form with which American subsidies work, to the form in which the current form of American socialism that we have, which is not, socialism, but we are absolutely subsidizing and creating like a socialist system for capitalists. It is a situation to where even when we're proposing or putting forth assistance programs, even the assistance programs that we have in place to help people who are in the working class, are ultimately not there to help people in the working class. They're there to take money that should be in the hands of the working class, take wealth that should be built by the working class by their own labor, and instead send it up to landlords, send it up to the biggest businesses that don't need it, send it up. Your tax dollars, they send it up. And that goes back to Israel too. And then I'll drop out for a bit. But, you know, when we talk about the response to these protesters on campus, you've seen Nazis protest on campus without actual Nazis, right? Actual ethno-supremacist groups, without a lot of police intervention, without a lot of hoopla. You know, there hasn't been this kind of response that you're seeing to students who are peacefully protesting a genocide. And look at the ways that all of the tools of, you know, the so-called tools of like a free liberal capitalist society are being utilized to quash speech. You know, all these people who are talking about free speech suddenly don't give a damn about it, are trying to quash it. The media company, which just had the White House press dinner, whatever that is, the White House, you know, when all the journalists and the politicians get together and they pat themselves on the back for how free their society is, right?
Press corps.
Yeah, the press corps. Yeah, the White House
Yep.
Correspondents' Dinner. Thank you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
They're sitting there patting themselves on the back for freedom of the press, for freedom of speech, and how they have to protect our democracy. Anyone who's paying any attention at all. Oh,
Hello. Oh, I wanted to hear what Biden had to say.
He's breaking up. I don't know if he's.
I wanted to hear if Biden had to say, what anyone is paying any attention at all. I don't want to put words in his mouth. Go ahead and take it, Stephanie. When he comes back.
I don't know what he was going to say.
I don't know. It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's a cliffhanger.
Oh, about well, yeah, the media, especially the corporate media at least is. I mean, they have a job to do, and that job is to maintain the status quo at any cost. Many of them probably believe that they are supporting free speech, but I think something like this really does expose them for what they are. As far as housing, I mean, under a capitalist system, the only thing for-profit companies can provide is what is profitable to provide. So if it is not profitable to house the homeless and the working poor, they're not going to do it. And this is a problem that goes back well before the housing crisis. But I think we really should reflect on how dire that crisis really was. I mean, that crisis alone, the main way working people can build wealth under our current system is through home equity. And the housing crisis, through all the foreclosures, wiped out half of all Black family wealth and 65% of all Hispanic family wealth. It was like 12% of white family wealth. It was a crisis, especially the subprime mortgages that did target people of color. And now we have corporations, private equity firms that are buying up single family housing for just absurd costs, even to the point where no one can really compete as far as, because they're putting down cash payments for these houses, you know, for much even more than their value, because the plan is very clear that home ownership for working people is not going to be a common thing in the future. It just isn't. They're planning on everyone except the very wealthy renting, which is taking away the prime way that working people build both wealth and any kind of financial security. I mean, the crisis we're in is a crisis of everything. It is a crisis of the environment, is the crisis of free speech and our freedom and civil liberties, our food, our housing. Capitalism can only function when it grows, and I mean, there is no such thing as infinite growth on a finite planet. So the way they're going to grow is to take every penny they can away from working people, to exploit the environment, to and obviously this is going to lead to civil unrest. And our police is becoming increasingly militarized, thanks in part to the training they do with the Israeli Defense Forces. They are preparing for this. They know it is not going to get better because it can't. Capitalism is not a self-correcting system in this way. It must constantly grow. It has to do whatever is profitable. This is not a crisis as they claim it, as the way they talk about it, as if it's like some kind of natural disaster that it could not be planned, this or predicted. This was absolutely predictable. It isn't some quirk. It is a feature of capitalism. It is not something that can be reformed, much like the capitalist system cannot be reformed. It's something that will keep going on and likely will keep getting worse until we replace capitalism with something that actually values humanity and this earth and sustainability above short-term profits and the wealth of the very wealthy. Yeah, that's about it. I wonder if Bide's back yet. I would like to know what the end of his statement was.
I would like to know it as well. I just want to add something to what you said there. It's really important to remember that even the social welfare programs, and this is one of the reasons that this can maybe be a segue into the dump the Dems part of our discussion tonight. But one of the biggest features that we should that nobody really knows is with these social welfare programs. First of all, when you means test a social welfare program, you're basically setting it up for like a class war situation, because the people that pay into the system are not the people that are able to generally use it. Take food stamps or Medicaid, for example. There's a difference, and I know I've said this before, there's a reason why Bernie Sanders used to talk about Medicare for all and not Medicaid for all. And I challenged someone on this who was a big proponent of Medicare for all, and I said, why don't you guys call it Medicaid? Because Medicaid for all, Medicaid is a much better system than Medicare. They're essentially the same payment structure, except for Medicaid also, poor people also have, like poor old people have to get Medicaid as well as Medicare, because Medicare doesn't cover all of their expenses. Whereas, in my experience with Medicaid, I got a crown, a dental crown on Medicaid. I'm obviously not old enough to get Medicare, but if Medicaid covers a crown, there's no hassle. There's no problem. You get what you need. You pay very little in copays, and basically, if you took away the means testing and made Medicaid a program that even people could buy into if they wanted to, or whatever the case would be, you could cover everybody with that program, and you wouldn't even have to write a new damn law. But they want to have Medicare for all, which for some reason, the way they fund Medicare is only 80% of the funds. But anyway, the point is that when you means test these poor people's programs, you're creating a system where the people that are the least politically powerful, i.e. the poor, the people for whom the means tested programs usually serve, those people that are the least political power in our system, most of them don't vote because they've been disenfranchised for one reason or another, because they've spent time in jail or whatever the case may be. They might have made a plea bargain or whatever, and they've lost the right to vote, or they're too busy working to go out and vote, or they just don't have any interest or feeling that the system helps them at all. Those people are the ones that get targeted by the people who have the most political power but get no benefits from the means tested program. Meanwhile, you have a program like SNAP, which is means tested, by the way, which is not a poor relief program at all. It only incidentally helps give some money to poor people for food. It's actually in the agricultural department, in the ag bill, because it was originally intended as a farm subsidy program where the government would buy excess food from farmers and guarantee a certain price in the market to protect farmers It had absolutely nothing to do with poor people. Then they had all this food in warehouses, and so that's where you get like government cheese and government peanut butter and dried milk and all this other stuff that the government just bought. It was all surplus food that the government bought. And once they sort of ran out of the surplus food because farmers started making money and not needing the SNAP program, then they transitioned to what we remember as, some of us remember as food stamps. And then they went to the SNAP card, but really it's a agricultural support program. It's not a poor relief program. So even if you have people committing 100% fraud on food stamps, they're still taking those food stamps to the store. They're still purchasing food from these massive corporate combines like General Mills and ConAgra and all these other companies, that those people are still getting all of those dollars from the SNAP program, and it's just barely helping poor people get by. But those companies that are getting all that money from these stores are just raking in the profits by the billions. And then it's those same interests that are fighting against giving poor people SNAP. And so you got to ask yourself who is benefiting from means testing social programs. The Democrats benefit from it because they get all kinds of money from donors and everything like that. So they means test these programs and stuff like that just to claim that they did something or try to do something or look like they tried to do something, and then proceed to let the Republicans go along and kill them. So the idea that we can trust the Democrats at all is, that's a mistake. And that's one of the reasons why we're running into that political campaign. We don't trust the Democrats any further. We can throw them. If they show up at these student protests, the students are right for saying, get the hell out of here. You're just here to bask in the glow of our movement's warmth, and try to get votes for yourself and try to pretend like you're looking like you're on the right side of history. When as a matter of fact, you continue to vote to send money to Israel to kill Gazans who were protesting against. So yeah, it really is a crisis of everything, Stephanie. You're absolutely right. Over.
Yeah, and neither party offers any real solutions. And I think, we do have very low voter turnout, but you can hardly blame people. I mean, both parties are pushing this culture war. And of course, Democrats don't really claim that they're pushing the culture war. But I think their failure to acknowledge class is why, they like to talk about racism and sexism, and those are actual issues. But without the root of the material conditions and economic oppression, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So when you have a white working class and they see that they're suffering, and they hear these elites on either coast talking about oppression, which is truly happening, they're bound to ask, well, what about us? We're not doing that great either. And because they're not talking about class, they have no real answer for that other than just calling those people racist. And some of those people might be racist. But the point is, if we're going to unite people, which is not what the owning classes want, we have to start talking about class as well, because that is the undermining thing of all this oppression, is that we have a small group of people, which, yes, does tend to be straight white guys, that controls everything, and they do it for their benefit. And nothing is going to change until that changes, until workers own the means of production, until we run the economy democratically, in a sustainable way that concerns itself with human need rather than corporate greed. And both parties we have, they offer different visions, I guess, of social issues, where the Republicans seem perfectly willing to go full Christian nationalism at this point, and the Democrats have no answer to that. And I understand that people, they want to vote for the Democrat because they're scared of that far right threat. And I'm not saying that threat isn't real. What I am saying is that the Democrats aren't prepared to do anything about it. I mean, when have centrists ever resisted a fascist political movement from gaining power and becoming popular with the masses? They don't have answers to the questions that the far right is asking. And unfortunately, they're asking these questions and pushing the wrong answers, getting people to blame things like trans rights and immigration, and pushing the worst kinds of bigotry in order to divide the working class. and the Democrats are offering nothing really in return, especially to young people, because one of the things they lean on, like when Nancy Pelosi was asked why young people might be so favorable or so they might see socialism so favorably and capitalism so negatively, she said, well, too bad, we're capitalists. That was her answer to him. And when pushed on it, she just talked about how well, back many decades ago things were better. It's like, we don't remember that. We've never seen that. And we certainly don't trust that to happen again. And even if we did, it isn't a solution. It's they build a middle class in order to have the poor people to threaten as like, well, if you don't go along with us, you could be as bad as them. And it's as if they think that as long as there's someone worse off than you, people won't want better conditions. I don't think I have more faith in people in that. I think they want better conditions, not just for themselves and people like them, but for the entire world. And even if we were to, even if Democrats were to take control and have all their policies passed, and we were to have all sorts of programs to help people, we still, our wealth here in the U.S. is built upon the exploitation of poorer nations. So that the best possible solution would be to have a slightly better standard of living here in the U.S. and global poverty everywhere else. Every hour of every day, 700 children die because of poverty. Easily preventable deaths every single hour. That is unacceptable, and that is a direct result of capitalism and wealth inequality. We shouldn't have to live with that. We don't have to. There's no reason for it. We have more than enough resources to go around. Not only can we provide for everyone, but we can do it sustainably, but we cannot do it under capitalism.
Very well said. Very well said. And I would add, to the person who was saying things used to be better under capitalism, you always have to ask, well, better for who? Answer me this. Has there ever been a time when capitalism didn't rely on an underclass, on creating groups of basically untouchables, or people whose entire existence or entire participation in the system is just their exploitation? Has capitalism ever been able to produce a society where it did not rely on that? I haven't seen it. Whether it's in the United States when we had to use a caste systems and systems of racial oppression to create groups of people who can only raise so high, people who were kept out of certain sectors, whose wages were always controlled by the access to what access they had to what kind of work. Whether it's people now who are in Africa, in Latin America, all over the world, who are work for pennies, who work in, look at what's going on in the Congo, whose labor is being, you have all these people whose labor is being exploited for the mining of silicon, for the mining of precious metals and materials that are used by Apple, that are used by all of these tech giants and these companies that rely on the resources from a country where they don't even get to experience the wealth created by their own natural resources. They have to be exploited in order to keep this system running. So what we're seeing, I think what we're seeing more and more is that that underclass, the creation of that underclass, is broadening out in America. For a while, we were even getting away with it from things like, mass incarceration. We're still using that. The prison laborers who are paid pennies a day for hard labor, so that they can buy, fucking commissary noodles or whatever, that are upcharged instead of being 13 cents for $13 in a prison. We still see that kind of exploitation happening in America, but it's being broadened out. It's no longer just like an underclass of minorities, or an underclass of like women, or an underclass of a group that you can just kind of push to the background and not be seen and not be heard. It's happening with students. It's happening with people who graduate from school and can't find a job. It's happening with people who go into debt for $100,000, $200,000, and then are being told that they're going to be making $16 an hour. It's happening with people who, you know, doctors and lawyers who are couples in LA. You know, you have I have friends who are both doctors, both graduated med school, and are both out of residency, and who should now be making money, who can't afford to buy a home in LA. So if they can't afford to buy a home in LA, who the hell can? And as we continue to see this, it becomes clear that no amount of voting for the Democrats or the Republicans is going to save this system, because both are invested in perpetuating this system for the powers that be. They both have the same masters, which is capital. You are not going to get a better situation just because Joe Biden is going to put the boot on your neck while saying trans lives matter. Because at the end of the day, here's the truth of it. To Joe Biden, they don't matter. To the Democrats, all of these things that they say, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's fucking, sorry for the cursing, but whether it's Nancy Pelosi kneeling down in kente cloth to try to show solidarity, what she's not willing to do is attack the systems which are exploiting those Black people in the first place, which are creating them to be an underclass in the first place. She can't touch that. The Democrats cannot touch that, because that is the system that gives them power. That is the system that they will never touch those kinds of systemic issues or those systemic pressures that hurt all of us, because that's not where their money comes from. That's not where their power and prestige comes from. And you could say anything you want to say out of your mouth, right? Joe Biden could say whatever he wants to say about how much he cares about the people in Gaza, about how he believes in free speech. Look at what they do, right? As long as they still, I mean, right now, Eric Adams in New York is a Democratic mayor with a Democratic House, or a Democratic, I believe they got, like, I forget what they call the legislature in New York, but Democratic judiciary, everything Democratic, right? And they will put their boots on your neck all the same. Why? Because at the end of the day, words are just words. What they're saying is just words. And why we see so much lockstep in Congress right now on funding Israel, despite the fact that so many people here at home and abroad in the rest of the world can see how disgusting and how inhumane and how blatantly just like evil what they're doing is, what their attacks on the civilian population in Gaza are amounting to, what the destruction of Gaza is looking like. It's so clear. Yet somehow both of the parties are totally fine with continuing to give them military aid, with continuing to send your tax dollars, okay, your money is going to fund that. And if you think that somehow voting for Joe Biden is going to change that, then I would like you to explain how. How is that going to happen? And really just ask yourself, and I'll stop ranting, but do you really believe that this system, as it's functioned your entire life, as it's gotten to this point, is going to has it been changing for the better? Have things gotten better materially for people on the ground by any metric, really? Are more working people able to live whatever the American dream is? Are more people able to actually afford their houses? Is the environment getting any better? What has materially changed in since you've been voting for Democrats or since you've been voting for Republicans? Nothing. And it never will. It never will, because these are parties that are not invested in humanity. They're invested in capital. And we got to wake up. We got to wake up and have the bravery to I mean, Donald Trump sucks, man. Like, he's the worst. That being said, they're materially, if they're both going to do the same sort of policies, then we're not directing our energy the right place if we just keep reinforcing that structure, keep adding credence, legitimacy, and power to it. We have to break it. We have to have the courage to actually try something new and force the issue, to force them to actually confront our material conditions. Over.
Yeah, Trump sucks and he's the worst, but Biden is the worst too. Just in a slightly different way.
Yeah. I'd like to speak. You want to go, Steph?
You go ahead. I'll go after you.
Well, I was going to speak to that and also welcome Josh Bradley, our Socialist Party candidate for Raleigh City Council here in North Carolina. Thank you all for anyone who's been joining and anyone who checks out this video, for joining us on May Day. We know a lot of folks, especially folks who are socialists and in the activist community and whatnot, and campuses now are doing a lot today. And I was just I'm one of them that was just like slammed all day, and I'm sure a lot of you all are coming from events. So thank you for being here and for working class people doing this sometimes after work and after another event. So keep that up. I did want to say really quick, I really love the fact that y'all are talking about that, really saying are Democrats really the lesser evil? Because in many ways you got to look at it like, the politics of punching down that the Republican Party has decided to completely, rest its entire platform on, it is very dangerous. However, what's more dangerous, that where you can actually, it's maybe a lot easier to call out those contradictions, or people who corrupt and lie and backstab folks, saying that they're on the side of working class people, they're on the side of workers, and then they shut down strikes. And this includes a lot of the squad as well, right? Saw what they did with the threat of the railroad strike, and Lord knows what they'll do if we start having general strikes, right? So these people are is smiling you in your face and stabbing you in the back versus like pulling out the gun right in your face. What would you prefer? Well, in a way, I kind of prefer, I'd like to be able to kick that gun out of that so-and-so's hand, as opposed to, you never know, they're just going to stab. Well, we do know they're going to stab us in the back, but it's very hard to, it's taken us decades for working class, really almost a century, really. I mean, it's scary for the working class to come full circle and now realize, like the Democrats, I really think millions of people are realizing that the Democratic Party is a death trap for us. And the thing that gets me the most is that unfortunately a lot of people are associating the betrayals of the Democratic Party with socialism, and that is that makes it extremely difficult for us to talk about. It's a question of power, and the people who stab us in the back while keeping the same masters in power, they're just representing a different wing, or sometimes just a different shade or whatever, that those folks are being confused with socialism, because that's the most offensive to me and the hardest to break through. And so I think that is why it's so important that this campaign exists, and why people who are fighting for real socialism and explaining what the difference is, it's not just about paving roads, right? It's not even just about Medicare for all. I mean, that's a good step forward. But Bill and Steph are talking about like a national healthcare service that very comprehensive, and that would be locally, that would focus on local needs and actually get the people involved in taking full control over their health care, and connecting it to the environment, connecting it to pollutants, connecting it to that they may be experiencing locally. And so it's something that's proactive, instead of like, well, I'm not saying that's bad, but like, they give me money because I'm poor. That's not it. That's not how society should work. If we have control over our society, it's not about us getting money from someone or getting a hand down. This means about us owning the whole damn thing and controlling the whole thing democratically. And it's a whole nother, and humankind has done this before in other periods of history. So this can be done. Really quickly, I think this also ties in with when we're talking about housing, with the fact that the housing situation is never going to be fully addressed under capitalism because of the fact that all of the institutions, including housing and healthcare and everything, um, are based upon the private ownership of land and other things, but in this case, land. And the people in power find it offensive when more of us have land, because as Stephanie so rightly said, it's so great to hear this from Stephanie talking about how capitalism expands and it needs to expand. That's absolutely true. Capitalism creates this dog eat dog situation where you have to own more and more capital, which is why these corporations are taking over almost all of the new rental property, and also single family home property are being bought out by corporate owners. And the reason is because you can buy in bulk cheaper. It is cheaper and you make a bigger profit. And so and you do that, or you die. But the thing is, it's like they've created such a worship. They've made us all worship the concept of private property, to the fact that, just like, if someone owns a little Airbnb, or like, has an extra house or whatever, or even, they're renting their own house, which a lot of people are doing now. They're turning that into like a class war between, or even if you have your own house, right, on your own house, as if like, other people having something is taking something away from you. And someone like, you're a couple paychecks away from being homeless too. Like, so it's just so crazy that they get us to fight amongst ourselves. And really what they want is they want the big bag, right? They want all us poor folks. They want to keep us in debt, so they still own our property until we're like, too old to enjoy it sometimes. And then they take it half the time after that, or to keep us indebted to this lifetime mortgage and lifetime rent, and to keep us in this whole indebtedness and enslaved to them, really. So that's what they see, and that's why this concept of private property is so tied with what we've seen with the reaction of the state to when these students are taking over these buildings. And it reminds me so much of Occupy, when people were trying to stay not in their foreclosed houses, and you'd have this unbelievable reaction, like you're like, wow, like I knew this was totalitarian, like in many ways, I knew it was a police state in many ways, but people coming out like in full riot gear, assault weapons, for some like some peaceful occupation of a house, someone who's being evicted, and then half the time they're evicted, and then that property doesn't get, nothing's done with it for years. I mean, there's properties like that have nothing has been done almost since the last Great Recession, which is insane. And that has everything to do with, like, when these students took over Hamilton Hall, I believe, in Columbia, they came with such force because they knew it wasn't just like them on the street. They knew they could use that concept of property, and that's such a draws. It's you're crossing a line so much with that capitalist mindset, that they come down so hard because they understand that when we figure out that if they can't kill us all, right? When we start to take that property back, that it's over for them. I think they know it in the back of their head. I don't think they're planning like that, in like, well, what we're going to do if they take it all. But it's so offensive because it just completely flies in the face of the property relations of capitalism. And I just really think that's it's a powerful thing to see what happened in New York last night. And we're going to see more of this. And I think it's important. Fortunately, no one's been killed that I know of, but it's important that young people are seeing this and seeing the state for what it is and who they serve. Over. Also, welcome, Josh.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what Josh has to say about this as well. Right now, we have a political system that is so twisted and skewed to the right because they've done everything they can, both Democrats and Republicans, to make sure that no one that's even remotely leftist, and I'm talking about even just reforming the capitalist system, can get anywhere on the ballot or can organize without being undermined. And the reason for this, of course, the Democrats are very dedicated to, you ever notice their solution for winning elections is always to appeal to Republicans or appeal to the center right or the swing voter, never to appeal to anyone on the left. And what you end up with that when you do that is you end up with this ratchet effect where things always are going to the right and never to the left, which is, of course, is exactly what capitalists and neoliberals want. So now we have the Republican Party getting to the point where they are Christian nationalist, and the Democrats trying to figure out how to appeal to those people. And fascism and the far right is so dedicated to being a reaction to the far left that they actually had to invent socialism as a threat, because we know that socialism, like any socialist movement, has been had its leaders assassinated as soon as they got even just a bit of power, or imprisoned, or their offices shut down. They will not allow it to persist at all. Once we get any power, we obviously do not want to seize power through violent means, but that is generally what the owning classes will require, unfortunately. But if you look at the demands of the Socialist Party of America back in the beginning of the 19th century, it was stuff like women's suffrage, banning child labor, unemployment insurance, Social Security. It's all of their main platform points were achieved. And it was not achieved by the political parties of capitalism. All the achievements that people are scared of losing under the Democrats, like gay marriage and abortion, which of course we already pretty much lost, those were achieved through strong grassroots movements and things like union organizing, not through Democrats. You will not get benefits to the working class unless you have grassroots worker organizing, period. Now, I believe in organizing through the Socialist Party USA, obviously, and I think our structure being a grassroots structure and multi-tendency, just as the working class itself is multi-tendency, is the best vehicle for that, because we really do practice these tenets of democracy, and we are approachable to most working class people, as we don't demand huge amounts of time from our members, and our dues are fairly reasonable, and because our power structures is more in the local, it is more democratic, which is the ultimate thing. Socialism itself is democratic, but they've had to invent this fictitious socialism just to rail against, because fascism itself is reactionary, and it makes me upset. Someone was talking about how they're painting socialism like people are looking at Democrats and think that's socialism. It's especially true of feminism, and gender issues are increasingly a problem today, with a lot of the just blatant misogyny, and as well as homophobia and transphobia that's going on. But when you see things about feminism in the mainstream, I mean, that's not feminism. You can't have feminism without class consciousness. It's this weird liberal identity politics tokenism that really has nothing to do with feminism, because it isn't talking about what working women are actually facing. And when you're talking about oppression, it's working women that are being oppressed. I don't doubt that owning class women do face sexism, but they are not under the heel of the boot. We are. And that's why we need a movement like what the Socialist Party USA is trying to build, which is grassroots. It's dedicated to intersectional socialist feminism that has based in class consciousness. And it is not willing to work with the Democratic Party or any capitalist parties, period. We don't want just reform of capitalism. I mean, I understand it is a worthwhile goal to improve the material conditions of workers, but just doing that is not going to be enough. And we need to build power structures that don't rely on the owning classes. We need to take back the power into workers' hands, and that's ultimately the only way things are going to change. And I realize it seems like an odd time to be asking for that with the threat of fascism, but actually, when you have the threat of fascism is exactly when you should be asking for that, because we are the only ones that have solutions to fascism. look at who is best at beating fascists, it's always going to be the far left. We are the ones actually answering the questions that they're asking, but we're giving real answers, not just saying to blame people different than you. So that is exactly why you should be looking into groups that are explicitly anti-capitalist. And if the group you're with isn't, I'd suggest checking out the SPUSA. I don't see us so much as in competition with other anti-capitalist groups, but I do see ours as the best vehicle for building a mass movement. So yeah, please check us out. We could use your help. We could use your money. We could use your skills. This is a grassroots democratic movement where we need your voice, and we do care about what you're suffering because we are suffering it as well alongside you. Joshua.
Hey, comrades. A couple of things. First of all, sorry I'm late. I was at the May Day March in Durham, and then decided to swing through Sheetz on the way back, which is a gas station food place, and it took 45 minutes to get my food. No diss on the workers. There was a lot of people in there, but if I'd could done it back again, I'd have turned around and hit the drive-thru at Bojangles probably. The second thing I want to say is, kids, don't smoke. It's bad for you. If you don't smoke, don't start. If you do, try to quit. I'm being kind of a hypocrite now, but it's going to be the elephant in the room. And third of all, again, I'm sorry I'm late. They don't call me the late Josh Bradley because I'm dead. Anyway, sorry. Hey, comrades. It looks like the discussion is about housing, the housing crisis and campus rebellions. I do have a story from the May Day March. In Durham, we were marching from CCB Plaza in the center of the city out through. The plan was to go through Duke University. The Duke University pigs stopped us and blocked us and did not let us enter Duke University. There were people from the Chapel Hill encampment that was raided, faculties and students from that met us at Duke and spoke and then marched back with us. There was, it was sponsored mainly by unions, USSW and UE 150 primarily. It was a very, very good march. So shout out to the organizers in Durham. They did a good job. Anyway, as the people were talking about lesser of evil voting, and the Democrats and the Republicans are not the answer. I agree with Stephanie and Tony and Biden, Bill, and everybody. Just remember that if you're voting for the lesser of evil, you're voting for evil. I mean, and you betcha that the Republicans will come up with an even fascier fascist the next time around. So the Democrats will be like, we need to give you a fascist light in order to save you from big fash, which is how they're doing it. And it's why the Democratic Party is divorced from even its own base. It's to the right of its own base. That's why they can always snatch a defeat out of the jaws of victory. Almost 100% of the time. And the people that they put up is, Joe Biden organized segregationists. I mean, he wasn't supporting segregation. He organized segregationists. He wrote the crime bill that incarcerates a large a disproportionate number of people of color, Black and brown and indigenous people, and helped write the Patriot Act. So I don't know how he is the same, kinder, friendlier choice. And the fact is, when it comes to the attack in Gaza, like, our tax money's funding it. We don't want to do it. I certainly don't want to do it. I don't have a choice when I pay my taxes to say, please don't drop bombs on children in Gaza with my tax money. But the Democrats will trip over themselves and will be joined by Republicans in buying bombs to drop on the heads of children in Gaza. I think the last number was over 14,500 children have died in the siege on Gaza. I don't know if that number is so large. It's how to properly visualize what 14,500 dead children look like. But everybody, in the United States that's watching this live stream or watching the recording, money that you gave to the government because they require it because of taxes has been going to pay for that. So all of that, I'm not saying it's our fault, but we are helping with that whether we want to or not. And when it comes time to vote and when it comes time to organize, you need to look at the people that are going out of the way, that are like the Democrats are really risking throwing this election. Not that there's going to be a huge material difference between a Donald Trump presidency and a Joe Biden presidency. People say, well, harm reduction, but is it harm reduction for who? Like wealthy white liberals? Maybe. Anybody else? Not necessarily. So I think it's important to look at the parties, look at the Socialist Party, to look at the other left anti-capitalist parties. But I personally 100% support Bill and Stephanie. And not the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party is not going to do anything to help anybody except for their donor class, who are generally wealthy, white, and conservative. Look at the ease of which these quote liberal democratic cities are going in and crushing these encampments brutally at times, and that's the power of the democratic status quo. Just crushing student movements. And one more comment before we wrap up. Okay, sorry. Okay. And the one thing that I want to talk, the other thing I want to talk is we're talking about the housing crisis. And as a candidate for the city council in Raleigh, one of the things that the city council in Raleigh, and I'm assuming at other large Democratic bastion cities, city councils tend to get in bed with the developers, and they will take land that they've banked, and it's city land, and they will give it sweetheart deals to these developers, right? On the promise that a small portion of that will go to a somewhat affordable housing for a limited time. So they will say 1 in every 10 units, 1 in every 100 units, we will make available affordable at 85% of the AMI. Sounds good. They're using affordable, they're using housing, but 85% of the AMI, the calculation that they're using in Raleigh is $100,000, right? Averaging out the single person AMI to the family AMI. So the number they're using is right out about $100. So they're worried that, that they're going to, it sounds, they're saying, well, it sounds good. It's affordable, right? But it's affordable to who? And that's why we on the left need to stop using affordable housing, right? We need to use low-cost housing. We need to use public housing. We need to use words like that. Because when you say affordable housing, everybody uses it. Like everybody consider themselves a progressive. Is that true? No. But if you look at all the Democrats, even the most right-wing Democrats, they consider themselves staunch progressives. So you got to watch the language and the shift in the language. That's the problem with the squad. They call themselves socialish or whatever. Big DSA endorsements. And then they Reagan the rail workers. But I think that we on the left, if we decide to run people for like city governments, which I think is important because a lot of times they're nonpartisan, so there's easy access to get onto it. Even if we don't win, we can put the message out there that there's stuff that we can do. We could reprioritize our city budgets, right? We should, instead of prioritizing policing, which hasn't shown to reduce crime in any significant way, it just puts more people in jail and forces more people out. If we provide housing. So the city, instead of using these public-private partnerships or any of the other magical thinking they're using to think that, these rich people that are trying to make money or somehow have developed a conscience, which they haven't, we could use city resources into hiring an architect, hiring a construction department, and we have the land. Let's just build the housing, right? The only thing that has ever been shown statistically to reduce crime is providing housing and services to people. And we need to funnel money away from armed police and put it into alternative response programs like the STAR program in Denver or the HART program in Durham, where they're sending people in crisis, people that aren't cops, right? That are trained to handle that. And it's good. It's been wildly successful. It's reduced shootings by officers in the cities that it's been implemented, and it's shown a real help, and the statistics tend to show that. And rather than putting money into the carceral state, they're putting money into things to help people. Do I think it's revolutionary? Maybe not, but do I think it would help? And it's where we need to prioritize instead of criminalizing everything. Yes, 100%, 100%, because we have had people in Raleigh. We had this kid that had traumatic brain injury. He had a moment of crisis, and he was murdered. And they called the cops, and he was murdered by the police. Right? He allegedly had a folding knife, like a pocket knife, but he was shot and killed by Raleigh police. Where is the justice in that? There's no justice in that. And what happened to the pig that shot him? Nothing. Was there an investigation? No, it wasn't even prosecuted. I think there might have been a week or two of paid administrative leave, but I think that basically somebody got away with murder, and that wasn't one. There's been 6 unarmed people of color that have been killed in the city of Raleigh in the last 6 years, and 0 prosecutions of the officers involved. So what I would say is, if anybody is interested in running for city government or sometimes county government, where there's a low barrier of entry to get in there, I would suggest that you do that. Get some friends, get some comrades, put together a collective. If you need any advice or help, please let me know. And if you can, join the Socialist Party. We'd love to have you, as long as you're not a capitalist. And please vote for Bill and Stephanie for president. Thank you. Over.
And also, please, if you live in Raleigh, vote for Josh. We need more socialists on their city council on there, and Josh is running. Also, Wayne is running. Our guy Wayne from the Left Unity Study Group. He's running for governor of North Carolina. So we do have some options.
Yeah, we're going to run some people here in Minneapolis. We haven't announced it yet, but we are trying to build a left coalition, far left coalition, that is working outside the Democratic machine here.
Guys, I think I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, because it's going to be so much worse if I don't.
Yeah, I don't know how much time I want to spend on this, but there's this theory it's called the median voter theory. And if you are familiar with political science on any level, you're probably familiar with that theory. But the idea is, in a Democratic election between 2 candidates, the person that wins the middle voter, the person that gets however the distribution of the voting ideologies is on the scale, the person that gets 50% plus 1 is the one that wins the election. And it's to the party's advantage to look for 50% plus 1, but that's it, because that's just enough to win the election, but you don't waste a whole bunch of resources in actually trying to get a whole bunch of people on either side. And as the median voter in this country shifts to the right, and this is kind of what Stephanie was talking about, we see the Democrats continuing, because the Democrats' strategy is 50% plus 1. And the Republican strategy used to be that, but they've sort of abandoned that. So they're not really fighting over the middle anymore. The Democratic Party has very solidly claimed the middle. And so I think that's probably the biggest, in my mind, the biggest reason why you shouldn't vote for the Democrats, because they've shifted so far to the right that they left a whole bunch of people on the left just completely without a party. And as Lawrence O'Donnell, who was the speechwriter for I believe he was the speechwriter for the Carter administration, if not someone else later on, but he's on MSNBC now. But he said, what's the left going to do? Where are you going to go? Who are you going to vote for? Jill Stein, the socialists? There's nobody that's going to win on the left, because the Democrats Democratic Party has moved so far to the right, but they consistently let the left know that they don't need their votes. There's so few of us on the left that we don't sway elections. The vast majority of the people who vote in this country are either in the middle or on the right. And so if you are on the left and you're complaining about how the Democratic Party has moved to the right, they don't even hear you because you're not the people who are ever going to vote for them anyway. So, I mean, you can either get on the bus or you can get left behind. That's our choice on the left. Well, you know what? I'll tell you what, man. It doesn't have to be me, but there are plenty of options on the left, and people who are on the left need to start voting for the left. We need to start voting for candidates. We need to start working for candidates, even if we lose on the left. This is our campaign. This is not their campaign. This is our campaign.
Amen.
Biden, anybody on this call, anyone who's ever worked with me can know we promote people within. We try to get people as involved and active as they can be with this, because this is how we train our next generation of leaders. This is how we promote our own people. We say, look, you want to learn how to do this, you come in and help us do it. We're going to put you to work because that's what we're doing. From top to bottom, we're all volunteers here. We don't take money from a bunch of rich people like some other candidates do. And to be completely honest with you, I think that's really what, if you translate that into workers' unions, this kind of stuff that you're seeing with independent labor movements and things like that, independent labor unions that are independent from the Democratic-controlled AFL-CIO, that really is kind of the ethic and the model that those independent unions are doing too. They're building their own movements because they can't rely anymore on anything related to the Democratic Party. And that's what independent labor movements is. Today's Labor Day. We're going to celebrate that. We're celebrating workers' movements. We're celebrating workers' power. And so that's how I'd like to finish off. And we'll open it up to the rest of you too to talk about those things. What independent labor movements mean to you. And I just really, if you feel really strongly about moving socialism, this is a place to do it. We'll welcome you. We'll put you to work. We've got no problem with that. Thank you very much. Over.
So I just want to add one short. I understand it does appear that the U.S. has moved to the right. In some way, it has. I believe the money that has been pumped into politics has made that appear more so than it actually has. But I would also say that our policies are generally very popular. If you just talk to people about socialism and you don't use the S word, they generally support it. They're against wealth inequality. They're against the abuses of civil rights that we're seeing. We do have policies that are popular, and we know that they work. We do not struggle for purpose like the Democrats and Republicans do. We know exactly what we're fighting for. We know who we're fighting for. We know that we do have the best interest of the working people in mind. And we can win this if we are able to spread class consciousness. It is something that is possible. It's been done before. And to be completely honest, it's the only way things are going to change.
Absolutely. And if any of you want to talk 1 minute, we could do an outro. I guess we've already had those from Bill and Stephanie. I'm going to post links to campaign links as well as Socialist Party links one more time. But 1 minute or close to 1 minute each, if Josh and Biden, what you would think about what you think about independent working class power and what it means to you. Just a real quick response. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important that we don't subscribe too much into the ruling parties and the ruling classes definition of left and right, because a lot of this is actually propaganda. And I think elections have always been propaganda, but I think they're it's even more fine-tuned. I do think that's why in 2016 there were these rebellions that really threatened and kind of scared even though they weren't true rebellions in terms of the fact that neither Trump nor Bernie were authentically either revolutionary or really serious about what about making things much different, right? Creating a whole new society. But I think they seem more authentic, at least, even though a lot of people realized they weren't after experiencing that. And a lot of people who vote for Bernie in the primaries voted for Trump. It's very interesting. And so I don't really focus too much on who people are voting for right now, because the choices that have the money, that are getting these billions of dollars, we're now, just in 2016, I think it was like a $6 billion federal election, and that broke all of the records. And just a couple of years ago, we were already at $12 billion, and that wasn't even like a that wasn't even a presidential year. So it's like, that shows you how hard they're having to try to really have this class war on us. And I really think that's why some people are afraid of the S word, but I think a lot of people aren't. But I think they're afraid of the fact that really, um, of the fact that they see what's going on with these encampments, they see the police state, and they don't feel like we have the power yet for that. But I think it's very important that we're here to say that we do, because I think a lot of people who voted for whomever or didn't vote at all, who's often, those are the folks with the best politics sometimes, because they realize, like, man, this person says this person promises this, and the same shit's going on, right? And so those people are often much more politically astute, even if they don't vote for us right away. So I think, like, to me, and maybe we could go around, like, independent power is about creating a new society and thinking beyond the constraints. I know it's not this idealism, like, this is how society changes. If you can imagine, these are all things that we can do if we can really bring our resources together and have the power, have the control over our resources. It's not just about degrowth, it's about actually smart and growth for need, and also development for humanity. And it's a totally different way of thinking. And I, you know, unabashedly, I'm even less ashamed of talking about it now than I ever have been, because I think we need that kind of revolutionary optimism and hope. And we can make some of that real today. Josh or Bide, if you want to say anything, or if Bill wants to, or Stephanie want to say their goodbye, either of you.
Yeah, I'll jump in for a bit. Uh, so thanks, Tony. Appreciate that. And if you could mute yourself, because you're getting the echo from.
Yeah, I'm just.
Oh no, I didn't mean for him to go away, and I feel bad. Tony, come back. But when
He
we're
just
talking
went
about
backstage. That's all.
okay, good, good. When we're talking about independent worker power, I think it's important to well, let me just say this: independent worker power begins with believing that you as a worker have power, with accepting the fact that despite all the ways that the system actually tries to disempower you, despite all the ways that it tries to tell you that you can't change anything, despite all the ways that it tries to convince you that your decision of how you change your society comes down to either the guy who wrote the crime bill who's funding Israel, or the guy who grabs him by the pussy who wants to fund Israel as well. Um, that your power is greater than that. That your ability to actually make change is greater than that. And that your life and your livelihood and your well being is worth something. It's worth a damn. Your having your access to having a little bit of autonomy and self determination in your life is worth something. Your belief that you should have some say in what happens with the fruits of your labor is worth something. Your belief that in a society and in a world that produces so much that goes to waste, that we should have an obligation to produce enough at a bare minimum that people's basic needs are met: housing, food, healthcare. That's something that's worth a damn. And independent worker power really means, uh, you know, understanding that you matter your little bit of a contribution can matter, and understanding that your power is coming from a bunch of people who are just like you in your same situation or very similar situations, deciding that they matter too, and coming together to do something incredible. I think all of us have been, for as horrible as what's been coming out of Gaza, for as horrible as what Israel is doing there, to have just an ounce of the bravery of the people in Gaza right now, even just a speck of the bravery of the people who are continuing to live, continuing to survive, continuing to resist, that's powerful. And you see the effect that that's having on these people, these students on college campuses, students who are going to prestigious universities, who could be part of the upper managerial classes, who could, go work in these corporate law firms, who could have done all these things. They're putting that future on the line right now because they have an ounce of the courage of the people in Gaza. And they're understanding that, you know what, maybe a career of just becoming a wheel in a capitalist machine, or the prospect of becoming a wheel in a capitalist machine, or getting, an internship in Joe Biden's White House, isn't worth supporting genocide. Isn't worth not sitting here and making my voice be heard that what our government is doing is bullshit, that what we're doing is evil, that what we're doing needs to be stopped. And, my heart and I am in awe of the courage of all those students as well, and all those people who are out there, and everyone who continues to fight, to resist, to do it because it's right, to do it because it's good. And when we're talking about independent worker power, this will be the last thing I say. If we can all believe in the way that those students believe, even if you can't believe it all the time, if you can believe it most of the time, if you can get up and do something, every little bit will help. And the big lie is the one that this propaganda keeps trying to tell you. The big lie is this whole, you don't matter. You're powerless. Listen to us. We have your best interest in heart. Reject it. Reject it and believe that the act of you doing anything, the act of you getting involved, the act of you deciding something for yourself, that's the kind of power that can expand, can grow, can spread. And once that spreads, then they cannot maintain their power over you. And even if they can, fuck them. Fight them anyway. That's my definition of it. So.
I don't know if I could add much to that. I just want to encourage people. It's pretty obvious we need better leadership in this country, and people have asked me, why run this campaign? What do we have to offer? And the truth is, the far right has nothing to offer. They offer only hatred and fear. They have no solutions. They offer no hope. It's going to take effective, principled leadership to make sure that we can have a sustainable and just future that protects the most marginalized, the people that they tend to bully. The choice to me is clear. We have to choose equality and justice. We have to destroy white supremacy and colonialism and sexism and all the bigotries that exist in our society. We have to build eco-socialism and sustainability to mitigate the climate catastrophe that we've basically have thrust upon us because of capitalism. I've worked with so many great leaders in the left over the years, and to be honest, I don't know what has happened to a lot of them. Maybe they've went on to do other things. I know this work is incredibly draining, and I know there's a lot of people that probably haven't even started or are just starting in their journey. And I'm not going to lie that it is a very tough road to hoe. You feel like you have everyone against you some days, but I do want to assure anyone listening out there that there is hope, and we have something very special that can't be bought or sold or fabricated or imitated, try as they might, by the ruling class. Despite all their power and influence and wealth, they will never have it, and that is camaraderie. that is what has lifted our spirits and kept us together through the bloodiest strikes and the darkest days, because it shows us that we're not alone and that other people care and that they'll be there for us no matter what. It teaches us that no matter how weak or powerless we may feel, that together we are strong and that only together we will prevail. And so I invite you to get involved locally, join the SPUSA, join the IWW, join some group that is working explicitly against capitalism and not within the system. Because as bad as you may feel looking at the news every day and seeing genocide and seeing people like you demonized, the only thing that takes a little bit of that hurt away is to help. And there's so many ways to help. So please reach out and please join us.
Yeah, we're actually homies over here. So, well said, Stephanie.
Yeah, very good, Stephanie. Do you want me to say something on independent worker? Okay, comrades. The one thing that when it comes to workers and the worker power is ultimately the power in this country is controlled by the workers and the bourgeois class, the owners, the managers and stuff understand that without us workers, nothing would get done. They would not have any money. They would not get anything done. So the thing to remember as a worker is together we have a lot of power, because without us, passive income doesn't exist. Without us, capitalist investor class doesn't get anything. You know, they contribute nothing except for money. A lot of times they inherited that money, but they don't produce anything. They don't do any work. And without us, whether you're working at fast food, whether you're working in a factory, whether you're cleaning hotels or rooms in a hotel, without any of those people, then nothing would get done. Those are positions of power. Workers have power, and for years, they're trying to make it about being job creators and helping us find a job and helping us be able to live, because they're providing the jobs. But we've gotten to this point in history where they don't pay us enough to pay rent, and they don't pay us enough for healthcare, and they don't pay us enough to eat. And one thing we can do, and the one thing independent labor movements and organizations do, is they've realized that together they have the power, because without workers, nothing gets done, right? Nothing gets done. You can't run a hotel if you don't have anybody to clean rooms, to check people in, and make sure everything's working. You can't run a restaurant without people to serve, without people to cook. You can run a hotel or a restaurant without managers there. I mean, and certainly without owners there, right? Because the owners, and to some degree the managers, don't work. Some of the managers do, so I'll give them that. But the people that benefit most do the least amount of work. And as we are living, as the current generation, the youngest generation that we have now is the fourth generation that did less well on average than their parents did across demographic lines, except for the wealthy, are beginning to see what it's all about. Like, as they eliminate the working class, the quote middle class, and exploit the working class, then they're going to see that the old adage that you get more conservative when you get older is going to be the lie, because nobody's doing better than their parents, and nobody's doing better than their grandparents. And ever since Gen X, which people don't talk about, we've done less well than the generation before us. So the thing we can do as workers is get together, join an organization. You don't have to join this organization, but you should join an organization, because there are power in numbers, and especially as workers, since workers are the people that make the world go round. Nothing could exist without our labor. If we get on the same page, we can make demands. Individually, they'll just let us go. But together we're strong, and together we are the reason that society is maintained. So, comrades, join a union, join an org. We'd like to have you here, but at least join an org somewhere. And solidarity, and happy May Day. Over.
Oh, I suppose it's up to me to finish it up. So with that, we'll close tonight's discussion. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you for our panelists for participating. And thank you for Tony for helming this whole operation. We are still working on the technical stuff, but all things considered, we pulled it off, and I'm pretty happy with that. And we'll be posting this on not only our Facebook page, we should have live streamed it over Facebook as well, live streaming it over YouTube, but you guys can also check it out in reruns. And yeah, absolutely. Happy May Day. Thank you, comrades, for everything. And we'll continue to march forward.
Bye, everybody.